The nebula's armpit lived up to its name in every possible way. The station's most notorious bar hung precariously off the less reputable end of K9's entertainment district, its ancient neon sign flickering in a way that made even the most hardened space travelers question their life choices. Inside, the air was thick with a mixture of various atmospheric requirements, creating a perpetual haze that the owner claimed was ambiance, but everyone else called probably toxic. Sarah Chen nursed her synthahol, wondering for the 100th time why she kept coming back to this dive. The drink tasted like something scraped off a ship's hull after a long haul through an asteroid belt. But it was cheap, and after 12 hours of wrestling with malfunctioning cargo loaders, cheap was exactly what she needed. Simply observe their pathetic bone structure, came a clicking voice from the next table, cutting through her peaceful moment of self-pity. No exoskeleton, no natural armor, not even decent claws. How they managed to achieve spaceflight is beyond my comprehension. Sarah didn't need to turn around to picture the speaker. Zyx'klik was a regular at the armpit, a mid-level diplomat from some mantoid world who'd apparently made it his life's mission to explain human inadequacy to anyone with ears or sensory appendages. Slurp, fascinating observation, most esteemed colleague, came the wet reply from his drinking companion, Matuk, a gastropodian whose species seemed to have evolved from something between a slug and a wine snob. Though I must point out, Slurp, they do seem to survive despite these limitations. Survive? Barely. Zyx'klik's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Look at that specimen there. No reinforced carapace, exposed soft tissue, and those ridiculous fingers instead of proper hunting appendages. Sarah glanced down at her supposedly ridiculous fingers, currently wrapped around her glass of questionable synthahol. She'd used those same fingers to rewire a fusion drive last week, but apparently that was less impressive than having built-in scissors for hands. Did you know, Zyx'klik continued, warming to his favorite topic, that their skeletal structure is inside their bodies? How does that make any sense? One good impact and they'd shatter like a Venusian crystal. The bartender, a four-armed quadraxian named Phil, he'd chosen the name himself, claiming his real name would make human heads explode, shot Sarah a sympathetic look as he polished a glass with 3 hands while mixing a drink with the 4th. You know, Sarah muttered into her drink, just loud enough for Phil to hear. For a diplomat, he's really bad at diplomatic whispering. And their strength. Zyx'klik was practically vibrating with smugness now. The average human can barely lift their own body weight. My youngest lava can carry 10 times that. Slurp, most impressive, Matuk agreed, leaving a slight trail of bioluminescent slime on the table. Though I have heard Slurp, they compensate with tools. Tools, Zyx'klik's mandibles clattered in dismissal. A crutch for the evolutionarily disadvantaged. Why, in any fair contest of species, humans would— Finish that sentence, Sarah called over her shoulder, not bothering to turn around. And I'll show you what these evolutionarily disadvantaged fingers can do with a beer bottle. The bar went quiet enough to hear Matuk slurping. Zyx'klik's antennae twitched in what might have been embarrassment or indignation. It was hard to read mantoid facial expressions when their faces were basically weapon parts. I was merely engaging in scientific discourse, Zyx'klik managed, his previous confidence notably diminished. Fascinating, Sarah replied, channeling her inner Matuk. Please do continue your scientific discourse about the species that invented both synthahol and the FTL drive you used to get here. Before Zyx'klik could formulate a suitably diplomatic response, the bar's entrance hissed open and several large figures ducked through the doorway. Sarah's danger sense, honed by years of dealing with shifty cargo manifests and shadier clients, began to tingle. The newcomers were Craxons, their beetle-like carapaces gleaming dully in the bar's cheap lighting, and they weren't here for the ambiance. The night had been going so well, or at least as well as any night could go at the nebula's armpit, where the drinks tasted like recycled engine coolant, and the ambiance screamed, health code violation in 12 systems. Sarah Chen had almost managed to tune out the pompous mantis alien droning on about human weakness when the door burst open with enough force to scatter several of the bar's more gaseous patrons. 5 Kraxan pirates shouldered their way inside, their chitinous armor gleaming dully under the bar's flickering plasma lights. Their leader, distinguished by more elaborate horn decorations and what appeared to be a leather jacket, though no one wanted to ask what kind of leather, clicked his mandibles menacingly. "Evening, gentle beings," he rumbled, his translator making his voice sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. "Time for Station K9's monthly infrastructure maintenance fee." Sarah took another sip of her synthahol, already counting down in her head. 3, 2, 1. "Now see here." Zyx'klik sprang up from his seat, all 4 arms gesturing dramatically. "As a diplomatic representative of the Mantidean Confederation, I must protest this obvious attempt at extortion. According to Galactic Code, Section 47B, paragraph..." The lead Kraxan's response was admirably efficient. One swipe of his armored foreleg sent Zyx'klik flying across the room, where he crashed into a display of what the bar owner claimed were authentic Earth tequila bottles. They weren't. "Anyone else want to quote regulations?" the Kraxan leader asked, his massive horn reflecting the neon beer signs. Matuk, Zyx'klik's slug-like colleague, immediately oozed under their table. Several other patrons suddenly remembered urgent appointments in other star systems. The bartender, a 4-armed Zyx'klik, merely sighed and started moving the more expensive bottles to safer shelves. Sarah set down her drink with deliberate care. "You know," she said, loud enough to carry across the now quiet bar, "I was really hoping to finish my drink first, but apparently we're doing this now." The Kraxans turned toward her voice, compound eyes glittering. The leader tilted his head, mandibles twitching in what passed for amusement among his species. "The weak human wants to object." "Nah," Sarah stood, rolling her shoulders, "just making an observation, like how you're standing on a floor that was recently mopped with industrial lubricant." The pirates glanced down, just as Sarah's boot connected with a hidden panel behind the bar, triggering the emergency cleanup protocols that the owner had installed after the last time someone tried to rob the place. The floor beneath the Kraxans suddenly became slicker than a politician's promises. Their weight, normally an advantage, worked against them as they scrambled for balance on 6 legs each. The leader managed to stay upright, but 2 of his crew went down hard enough to crack their chest plates. "That's the thing about being weak," Sarah grinned, cracking her knuckles with practiced nonchalance. "You learn to be creative." From his position sprawled among broken bottles, Zyx'klik watched in horrified fascination as the human, the supposedly frail, evolutionarily disadvantaged human, stepped forward to face down 5 of the most notorious pirates in the sector. And was she smiling? "Last chance," Sarah announced cheerfully. "You can leave now, or you can learn why humans have a specific word for bar fight in every language we speak." The Kraxan leader's translator crackled as he roared, "Kill the soft one!" "They always choose option 2, Sarah sighed, reaching for the nearest bar stool. "Hey, Jerry," she called to the bartender, "put on some music, would you? If I'm going to miss finishing my drink, I at least want a decent soundtrack." As the opening notes of Another One Bites the Dust began playing through the bar's speakers, Zyx'klik felt his mandibles go slack. The human was actually going to fight them, alone, without even proper chitin. "Oh, and Zyx'klik," Sarah called out as she sized up her opponents, "pay attention, you're about to learn why humans don't need natural armor to be dangerous." The first Kraxan charged, and the real education began. Sarah Chen had learned many things during her years hauling cargo across the galaxy. How to sweet-talk a malfunctioning engine, which space lanes to avoid during Thoraxian mating season, and most importantly, different species had very different senses of humor. Unfortunately, Kraxans had none at all. "Hey," she called out to the approaching pirates, barstool held casually in one hand, "what do you call a Kraxan pirate who's bad at stealing? An amateur throwpod." The lead Kraxan's compound eyes flickered in confusion. His translator spat static as it tried to process the pun. "Was that a threat?" "No, it was a joke. Here's another one. Why don't Kraxan pirates wear shoes? Because they're lava-less." From his position among the broken bottles, Zyx'klik watched in mounting horror as the human continued antagonizing creatures that could snap her in half. His scientific mind catalogued the obvious disparities. The Kraxen's reinforced exoskeletons could deflect small arms fire. Their enhanced strength could bend durasteel. Their natural weapons could… Was she still telling jokes? What's black and blue and scared of humans? You guys in about 5 minutes. The lead Kraxen's mandibles clacked in rage. Enough! Brothers, tear her apart. See, Sarah sighed, spinning the bar stool experimentally. This is why humans invented comedy clubs. To help people like you develop a sense of humor. The first pirate charged, his horn lowered like a battering ram. Sarah stepped aside with surprising grace, using the bar stool's momentum to redirect the Kraxen's charge. He crashed into the bar with enough force to crack both the counter and his own carapace. Point of fact, she continued, as if giving a lecture, humans developed humor as a survival mechanism. When you're a species without natural weapons, you learn to think creatively. 2 more pirates moved to flank her. Sarah responded by throwing her synthahol in one's compound eyes. The liquid didn't hurt him, but it did make him crash into his companion, their armored bodies clanging together like drunken church bells. For instance, she duck-rolled under a swinging claw. We learned early that bigger doesn't always mean better. Mass times acceleration equals force, sure, but inertia's a funny thing when you're top-heavy. As if to demonstrate, she used the bar stool's legs to sweep one Kraxen's feet out from under him. The pirate's own weight did the rest, sending him crashing through a table. Zyx'klik's antennae twitched frantically as he processed what he was seeing. The human moved with a precision that defied his understanding of their species' limitations. Where was the weakness he'd catalogued so carefully? The evolutionary disadvantages. Also, Sarah continued, now wielding half a broken bar stool like a quarterstaff, humans are really good at turning literally anything into a weapon. Ever wonder why we have so many sports involving sticks? The lead Kraxen, finally recovering from his confusion, bellowed in rage. Stop talking. Make me, Sarah grinned, falling into what looked suspiciously like a fighting stance. Or better yet, here's another joke. What's the difference between a Kraxen pirate and a real threat? The pirate leader charged. The real threat would have noticed I was keeping them busy while the bartender hit the station security alarm. Right on cue, sirens began wailing in the distance. The Kraxen's antennae all shot up in alarm. Which was exactly when Sarah made her move. She launched herself forward, sliding under the leader's guard on the still slick floor. The broken bar stool caught him right in the thorax joint. Not hard enough to damage his armor, but perfectly placed to hit a nerve cluster that made his legs spasm. See, Zyx'klik, she called out as the pirate leader stumbled. This is why humans study xenobiology, not for diplomacy, but to learn where all the soft spots are. A supporting pillar groaned as one of the pirates slammed into it. The bar's ancient fire suppression system, interpreting the impact as a threat, began spraying foam everywhere. In the growing chaos, Sarah's voice rang out with disturbing cheerfulness. Oh good, props, you guys ever hear about human foam parties? Zyx'klik, still trying to comprehend how this weak species had turned the tables so completely, heard the lead Kraxen mutter something that his translator rendered as, "What in the 16 hells did we just start?" The human's answering laugh suggested they were about to find out. The first Kraxen charged with the grace of a drunken cargo hauler, clearly expecting his superior mass and armor to do all the work. Sarah hefted the bar stool with practiced ease, and several watching aliens gasped as she did something that seemed to briefly offend the laws of physics. Instead of using it as a simple club like any sensible species would, she hooked one leg of the stool through the Kraxen's forward mandibles while simultaneously pivoting the seat under his horn. The resulting leverage sent the massive insectoid into a spectacular flip that ended with him crash-landing onto a table of Jovian whiskey. Did she just use basic mechanics to weaponize furniture? Matuk asked nobody in particular, his eye stalks extended in fascination. That's nothing, Phil the bartender replied, calmly moving his more expensive bottles to safety. Wait till she finds the pool cues. As if on cue, Sarah vaulted over the bar, narrowly avoiding a swipe from another Kraxon. She emerged with 2 pool cues held like eskrima sticks. Fun fact about human bar fights, she announced, twirling the cues with unnecessary flourish. We can turn anything into a weapon. Literally anything. To demonstrate her point, she grabbed a handful of bar nuts from a nearby bowl and flicked them with terrifying accuracy into the compound eyes of the nearest pirate. As he staggered, temporarily blinded, she brought both pool cues down on his antenna in a move that would have made any pool shark wince. Is that a rubber chicken?" Zyx'klik asked in horror as Sarah reached behind the bar again. "Emergency equipment," Phil explained, using two hands to mix drinks while the other two documented the fight on his comm unit. She insisted we keep one after the Rigelian incident. The rubber chicken made its debut as an improvised grappling hook, somehow tangling around a Kraxen's legs, while Sarah used the pool cue as a vault to deliver a kick that probably violated several laws of momentum conservation. "You know," Sarah called out between dodging swings that could have crushed concrete, "this would be over a lot faster if you'd just leave." She punctuated this suggestion by somehow turning the dartboard into a discus, sending it spinning into a pirate's thorax with enough force to crack his armor. "Impossible," the Kraxen leader roared. "Humans are weak. You have no natural weapons." Sarah's laugh echoed through the bar as she slid under a massive swing, coming up with what appeared to be a cocktail shaker. "Natural weapons? Please. We turned everything into a weapon. Why limit yourself?" The cocktail shaker, it turned out, made an excellent improvised flashbang when combined with certain volatile mixers and a bar lighter. The resulting explosion was small but spectacular, leaving two more Kraxens stumbling around with their sensory organs overloaded. "Taking notes?" Sarah asked Zyx'klik as she danced past his hiding spot, now wielding a serving tray like a shield. "This is why humans survived despite being weak. We're really good at using our environment." The remaining pirates were looking distinctly less confident now, especially as Sarah began constructing what appeared to be some kind of launching mechanism using rubber bands, a handful of swizzle sticks, and what might have been a part of the jukebox. "Also," she added, taking aim with her improvised weapon, "we're really good at physics. Want to see what happens when you combine elastic potential energy with your species' documented sensitivity to sonic vibrations?" The lead Kraxen's compound eyes widened in genuine fear. "You wouldn't." Sarah's grin suggested that she absolutely would. "Last chance to leave before I demonstrate why humans invented the concept of percussive maintenance." Behind the bar, Phil was already reaching for ear protection. This, he knew from experience, was about to get loud. It started with a slow clap from the corner. A burly human freighter captain named Mike stood up, cracking his neck. "You know, Sarah, it's not very sporting to hog all the fun." Two more humans emerged from different corners of the bar, and Sarah's grin widened. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the alien audience, "allow me to demonstrate why humans always travel in packs." "Is that Jackson from maintenance?" Zyx'klik whispered to Matuk. "And Wong from hydroponics," Matuk confirmed, slurping nervously. "I had no idea they were combat specialists." "We're not," Jackson called out cheerfully, rolling up his sleeves. "I fix toilets for a living. But every human is born knowing two things, how to breathe and how to bar fight." The Kraxen pirates, already rattled by Sarah's one-woman show of improvised combat, now found themselves facing four grinning humans who seemed to be treating imminent violence like a social event. "Someone put on some music," Wong shouted, grabbing a bottle by the neck. "Can't have a proper bar fight without a soundtrack." Phil, ever helpful, reached for the jukebox controls. The opening piano notes of "Don't Stop Believin'" filled the bar. "Oh, hell yes," Mike laughed. "Journey. Sarah, remember that move we did in the Martian dive last month? The one with the chair flip?" Sarah was already positioning herself. "Kraxens are heavier than Martians, though. That's what makes it fun." What followed was something the alien observers would later describe as choreographed chaos. The humans moved with an uncanny coordination that seemed to require no verbal communication, ducking and weaving between the larger Kraxens like water around rocks. "Size difference," Sarah called out. "Leverage play," Mike responded, dropping to one knee. Sarah used his back as a springboard, launching herself over a Kraxen's horn to land on another's shoulders. The pirate's superior strength meant nothing when he couldn't reach the human using his own armored carapace as cover, while she efficiently short-circuited his neural clusters. "They're dancing," Zyx'klik observed in disbelief. Indeed, the humans had somehow synchronized their combat with the music's rhythm. Jackson and Wong were tag-teaming a particularly large Kraxon, darting in and out of his reach while humming along to the chorus. "Strangers, waiting," Wong belted out while sliding between the pirate's legs. "Up and down the boulevard," Jackson finished, using the momentum to trip their opponent. The Kraxon leader watched in growing horror as his crew was systematically dismantled by what appeared to be an impromptu dance party with violence. Every attempt to use their superior strength and armor was turned against them. The humans simply refused to stand still and fight properly. "This isn't combat," he protested. This is a Tuesday night," Sarah corrected, performing what appeared to be a pirouette to avoid a swing. "You should see us when we're actually trying." The music swelled to its crescendo just as Mike and Sarah executed their infamous chair flip maneuver. It involved 2 humans, 3 chairs, basic physics, and complete disregard for the conventional uses of furniture. The result sent 2 Kraxons colliding in mid-air with mathematic precision. "Don't stop, believe in," all 4 humans sang in unison as their opponents crashed to the floor. From his observation point, Zyx'klik's scientific mind was rapidly recalculating everything he thought he knew about human combat capabilities. They weren't fighting like warriors. They were treating Mortal Kombat like a party game, and somehow that made them more effective. "Should we help them?" Matuk asked as the chorus kicked in again. "I don't think they need it," Zyx'klik replied weakly, watching Sarah use a Kraxon's own horn as a leverage point to throw him into his companions. "But I am beginning to understand why humans have so many words for fun that also mean dangerous." The remaining pirates were now back to back, facing a circle of grinning humans who were still bouncing slightly to the music's beat. "Ready for the finale?" Sarah asked her impromptu dance partners. "Just like karaoke night?" Mike suggested. "Just like karaoke night." The Kraxon leader had just enough time to ask his translator what karaoke meant before the humans moved as one, and the real show began. The moment everything changed was when Zyx'klik noticed Sarah Chen was humming. Not the desperate sounds of exertion he'd expect from a supposedly inferior species fighting for survival, but an actual tune. It took his translator several seconds to identify it as Swan Lake. "Is she enjoying this?" he asked Matuk, who had emerged from under the table to get a better view. "Slurp based on human vital signs I'm detecting. She appears to be barely reaching elevated heart rate levels. Slurp fascinating." That's when the door hissed open again, and 2 more humans walked in. A tall cargo hauler named Mike and a short maintenance tech called Rodriguez. They took one look at the chaos, exchanged glances, and grinned. "Hey, Sarah," Rodriguez called out, casually dodging a flying bottle. "Need a hand?" Sarah, who was currently using a Kraxon's own momentum to send him spinning into the jukebox, laughed. "Sure, I'm thinking Act 2, Scene 3. "The choreography from Don Quixote?" Mike asked, already moving to position. "Bold choice." Zyx'klik's mandibles dropped as Sarah suddenly shifted her entire fighting style. Gone were the efficient, brutal movements of before. Now she was dancing. Her feet moved in precise patterns as she pirouetted around a charging Kraxon, using his own bulk against him while maintaining perfect form. "Before I became a cargo pilot," Sarah explained, executing a perfect grand jeté over a sweeping claw, "I danced with the Lunar Ballet Company. The gravity training comes in really handy." The 3 humans moved in perfect synchronization, as if they'd rehearsed this. Rodriguez slid across the bar, passing shot glasses to Mike, who began juggling them with theatrical flair. Sarah, meanwhile, was leading 2 very confused Kraxons in what appeared to be an involuntary pas de deux. "You see," she continued, using a rubber plant as an impromptu balance beam. "Humans don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to have fun doing it." The shot glasses became projectiles, precisely aimed at the gaps in Kraxon armor where their sensory organs were exposed. Mike and Rodriguez had somehow turned a tablecloth into a makeshift net, trapping another pirate in what looked suspiciously like a stage curtain call. "This is impossible," the Kraxon leader roared, his translator crackling with confusion. "Our tactical analysis showed humans were primitive, weak. You should be cowering." "Oh, honey," Sarah laughed, executing a spinning kick that would have made any ballet master proud. You analyzed our physical capabilities. You never bothered to check our entertainment feeds, did you? The three humans were now moving in perfect formation, herding the remaining pirates into a corner using nothing but borrowed serving trays and impeccable timing. Sarah led the charge with a series of quick fouettes, each spin bringing another improvised weapon into play. Because if you had, she continued, somehow managing to give a lecture while maintaining perfect dance form, you'd know that humans turn everything into an art form, even fighting. The final act was a masterpiece of coordination. Rodriguez slid the remaining shot glasses across the floor in a precise pattern. Mike used the rubber plant as a springboard, launching himself into a move that would have looked more at home on a stage than in a bar fight. And Sarah proved exactly why the Lunar Ballet Company had once called her their rising star. She moved through the Kraxen's defenses like water through a sieve, each step precise, each strike measured. The pirates' superior strength meant nothing against an opponent who treated their attacks like dance cues. Their armor was useless against someone who had spent years learning exactly how to place maximum force through minimum contact points. The Kraxen leader went down to a combination of moves that looked like it belonged in both a combat manual and a ballet program, his legs swept out from under him by Sarah's perfect arabesque, while Mike and Rodriguez provided the world's most violent backup dancers. And that, Sarah announced, striking a pose that wouldn't have looked out of place in Swan Lake's finale, is why you never start a fight with someone who knows both Tchaikovsky and Krav Maga. The remaining pirates, those still conscious, began a hasty retreat. Their leader, attempting to maintain some dignity despite being thoroughly defeated by what he'd assumed was a weak species, managed to click out. "This isn't over." "Oh, but it is," Sarah replied, still holding her pose. "Because now you have to explain to your crew how you got your thorax handed to you by a ballet dancer and her impromptu dance troupe." As the pirates fled, Zyx'klik finally emerged from his hiding spot, his entire worldview thoroughly shattered. I don't understand. You were holding back the entire time." "Of course," Sarah shrugged, finally relaxing her stance. "This was just a bar fight. You should see what we do when we're actually trying." "Slurp, I believe," Matuk announced, his eye stalks fully extended in excitement. "I shall have to revise my thesis on human combat capabilities, slurp, and perhaps take dance lessons." Phil, who had recorded the entire thing, was already loading the footage to the station's entertainment network. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the remaining patrons, "I believe this calls for a round on the house, and maybe some dance lessons." Sarah finally returned to her original seat and her now warm synthahol. "So, Zyx'klik," she smiled, "want to revise your opinion on human weakness?" The mantis-like diplomat could only nod weakly, his antennae still twitching from the shock of witnessing what would surely become known as the Great Balletic Bar Brawl of Station K9. The Kraxen pirates limped, staggered, and in one case rolled their way out of the nebula's armpit, leaving behind scattered pieces of their dignity and several chunks of exoskeleton. The last one through the door was still picking rubber chicken feathers out of his sensory organs. A profound silence settled over the bar, broken only by the soft clink of Sarah's glass as she finally resumed her seat and her now room-temperature drink. "So anyway," she said to Zyx'klik, as if they'd merely paused a casual conversation, "you were saying something about human evolutionary disadvantages." The mantis-like diplomat's antennae twitched spasmodically. His entire worldview, carefully constructed from decades of xenobiological research and what he'd thought was empirical evidence, lay in shambles around him like the bar's furniture. But, his translator crackled with his distress, "you have no natural armor." "Made better armor," Sarah shrugged, sipping her drink. "No enhanced strength. Invented leverage. No biological weapons. Turned everything into a weapon." She gestured at the rubber chicken still hanging from the ceiling fan. "Even toys." Meanwhile, Matuk had produced a datapad and was frantically documenting everything. His eye stalks swiveled in every direction, taking in the aftermath of the fight. Slurp fascinating. The improvisational combat techniques alone could fill 3 research papers. Slurp and the integration of artistic expression into conflict resolution. Slurp, Professor KK Tal will never believe this. Other alien patrons were emerging from their hiding spots, viewing the humans with new eyes. A Zyx'klik engineer was studying the remains of Sarah's improvised swizzle stick launcher with professional admiration. Two Jovian merchants were quietly making notes to update their species threat assessment protocols. Phil, the bartender, was already tallying up the damage while his other hands mixed drinks. "Not bad," he announced. "Only broke half as much as last time." "Last time?" Zyx'klik's voice hit a register his translator couldn't quite handle. "Oh yeah," Mike chimed in, helping right an overturned table. "You should have seen the Centaurian incident last month. Sarah did this amazing thing with a potted fern and a karaoke machine." "Please." Zyx'klik held up all four hands in surrender. "I believe my paradigm has been sufficiently shifted for one evening." Sarah finished her drink and stood up, smoothing down her clothes with the same care she'd shown in demolishing 5 armed pirates. "Well, this has been fun, but I should probably file an incident report. Apparently, there's paperwork when you defend a station using interpretive dance and bar furniture." "Slurp, would you be willing to be interviewed for my thesis?" Matuk asked hopefully. "I'm considering a new focus: human recreation as combat training, a comprehensive study of warfare through entertainment." "Sure," Sarah smiled, "but you might want to observe karaoke night first. That's when things really get interesting." As she headed for the door, she paused next to the still shell-shocked Zyx'klik. "Oh, and for future reference, next time you want to lecture someone about evolutionary superiority, maybe check if they have turned their supposed weaknesses into an art form first." The door hissed shut behind her, leaving behind a bar full of aliens engaged in serious recalculation of their species' relative positions in the galactic hierarchy. "Slurp, I believe," Matuk announced to no one in particular. "I shall also need to research this karaoke phenomenon. Slurp for science, of course." Zyx'klik just stared into space, mumbling something his translator rendered as, "They turned interpretive dance into a combat style. The humans turned dance into a weapon. How do you even defend against that?" Phil, ever helpful, just smiled and started mixing another round. Something told him the station's alien population was about to develop a sudden, intense interest in human cultural studies. 3 hours later, Zyx'klik found Sarah in the station's observation lounge, watching the stars. His antennae drooped in what humans had come to recognize as embarrassment. "I may have been hasty in my assessment of your species," he chittered. Sarah smiled. "There's a human tradition for moments like this. It involves buying someone a drink and admitting you were wrong." "Both activities sound appropriately humbling," Zyx'klik agreed. "Though I confess, I'm curious why your species combines social bonding with mild neurotoxins." "Makes the apologies easier," she winked, "and the dancing." Back at the nebula's armpit, Phil was already hanging a new sign: "Human-style happy hour. Learn to fight like a Terran. No actual fighting permitted. Management not responsible for spontaneous dance outbreaks." "You're really going to teach aliens human bar fighting?" Sarah asked when she saw it. All 4 of Phil's arms spread in an entrepreneurial shrug. "They're going to try learning it anyway. Might as well make some credits and ensure they don't actually kill each other." 2 days later, Zyx'klik stood before the Galactic Species Assessment Board, his antennae still slightly crooked from the bar fight. "Distinguished colleagues," he began, "I propose we immediately reclassify humans from Class 3, physically limited species, to Class 1, handle with extreme caution. I have witnessed them turn furniture into weapons, combat into art, and chaos into strategy. They don't just adapt to overcome their weaknesses. They transform those weaknesses into strengths, and then they make games out of them." He paused, remembering Sarah's ballet-inspired takedown of the Kraxan leader. "And most terrifyingly of all," he concluded, "they appear to genuinely enjoy doing so." "Any questions?" A junior board member raised an appendage. "What about the rubber chicken you mentioned in your report?" Zyx'klik's antennae twitched. We don't talk about the rubber chicken, and that's why we never stock them anymore."